Ohio State has added another five-star recruit. Sean Stewart from Duke is coming to Ohio State after 1 year with the Blue Devils to play for Jake Diebler's basketball Buckeyes. Sean Stewart, the latest transfer commitment for Ohio State, which has now added 4 total transfers in the 2024 offseason, 2 of whom were five-star recruits in the 2023 recruiting class. First, Ohio State landed Aaron Bradshaw, former center at Kentucky, and now the Buckeyes have landed Sean Stewart, former power forward at Duke. And Andy, we said it with Aaron Bradshaw. I think we can say it again with Sean Stewart. Anytime you can land a player with that kind of five-star pedigree, there's reason to be excited.
Absolutely. This is another huge pickup for Jake Diebler when you talk about building this front court, building this team. Sean Stewart, not a guy who played a lot last year for Duke, part of the reason why he entered the portal. But in that limited time he played, only 8 minutes per game, really put up really good production. I mean, on the surface, 2.6 points, 3.2 rebounds, half a block, half a steal per game isn't anything impressive. But again, it's relative to the minutes he played. It's pretty good production. Per 40 minutes, those stats translate to 12.7 points, 15.3 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks, 2.5 steals. This is a guy who could take an immediate leap to being a double-double, multiple block kind of production in games next year, based on the athletic traits, based on the pedigree. Broke Zion Williamson's vertical leap record at Duke by half an inch. I think a lot of people are familiar with how high a flyer Zion Williamson is. If you can out jump that at the forward position, my goodness, what you can add. And I think one of the top things, talking to analysts, talking to sources within the program, is his motor as well. Guy who gives a lot of effort on the court, guy who uses those traits, those athletic traits, to their full capacity because of the way he can move, the way he can influence as a help defender, getting over and just trying to be around the ball, a lot more of defense's effort than anything else. And when you're talking about a guy who's going to help replace some of what Felix Okpara gave you defensively, he obviously still has to prove it out, but he definitely has the athleticism and he has that motor to produce some of those things. But I think the larger thing it speaks to when you look at the construction of this roster now, Dan, is the identity that Jake Diebler has said, even since he took over as interim head coach, before he was named full-time head coach. That day he came in for Chris Holtman, was they want to play fast, they want to play aggressive. Well, they've got some really fast, really aggressive front court pieces now between Aaron Bradshaw and Sean Stewart. And again, that's something echoed by the sources within the program that I've spoken to, that they're building this team around versatility, around high pace, around aggression going forward. They want to get out and run in transition a lot, and they feel they can really do that with this combo of ads in Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw. So I think there's not much reason not to be excited about this addition if you're an Ohio State fan.
There is a little bit of risk reward here because these are two guys who didn't play a lot last year as true freshmen, but one of them was at Kentucky, one of them was at Duke. I mean, those are programs that have a lot of talent every year, and so there's going to be guys who, even though they're very highly regarded out of high school, don't necessarily play a lot right off the bat in college basketball. And obviously one reason why they both entered the transfer portal is because they're looking for bigger roles, and they should get those roles at Ohio State. I think you would certainly project, especially with Felix Okpara gone, that both of these guys are going to be starters next year for Ohio State. Devin Royal could be in that mix at the 4 as well, but I certainly think Sean Stewart is coming into Ohio State to be a starter. He's coming in with a lot of upside to be an impact player for the Buckeyes. And I think, at least from my perspective, if you are Jake Diebler taking over this program, I think you want to roll the dice a little bit. I don't think you want to just take necessarily, quote unquote, safe players who maybe are a little bit more established veterans, but don't have as high of ceilings. I feel like that was a lot of time the kind of players that Chris Holtmann looked for, and it didn't yield the kind of results that Ohio State was looking for. And so I think if you want to take this program to the next level, you have to take some chances on guys like this, and even just being able to reel in guys like this, because especially Sean Stewart, this is a guy who was recruited by Ohio State out of high school, but they weren't able to close the deal at the time. Granted, they were going up against Duke, and it's a hard school to compete against in basketball. But the fact that Jake Diebler has been able to go into the portal and bring these guys in, it's an encouraging sign. I mean, I remember our Josh Paloha had the stat after Marcus Johnson's commitment that between Marcus Johnson and Aaron Bradshaw, Ohio State had landed 2 5-stars. Chris Holtmann landed 0. Now that count is 3-0 in favor of Diebler in a matter of a month.
Absolutely. It's an excellent point, Dan, because I think these types of high ceiling players speak to the belief that Jake Diebler has in himself as a developer and in the guys that he goes after. I think you felt that confidence instilled in the players down the backstretch of the season, and it's why they had some success. Granted, you have to sustain those results now. It's much different taking over and the emotions that go with that versus building for a full season as now the full-time head coach. But what Ohio State was able to see out of certain assets, even guys that are no longer on the team like Roddy Gale Jr., took their play up another notch once Diebler took over. And in that initial recruitment, too, the relationship that Diebler built with Sean Stewart and his family initially was huge in landing this commitment. You get the sense that, I mean, I'll just read the quote here. This is from Michael Stewart speaking with the Columbus Dispatch about a week ago here. Obviously, before Sean was committed to Ohio State, while they were still feeling out schools, he said, obviously, we spoke with Holtmann and had a relationship with him, but it was mostly Diebler, talking about Sean's initial recruiting process. This time around, it's all Diebler, but he's the head coach. His word carries a lot more weight, a lot more responsibility. We respect what he's trying to get done, and we're going to try to move fast on this thing, but Ohio State is definitely a situation that we like. Obviously, liked it enough to commit, but the relationship building and parts of the reasons why Ross Bjork said he wanted to hire Diebler initially because of that authenticity and his ability to relate to players, get the most out of players, recruit players, that track record he has subtly as, you know, Holtmann's top recruiter, bringing in some top 10 classes, and even going back to what he did at Vanderbilt with players like Darius Garland in recruiting. That's one of the reasons he was hired, is to bring in talents like this. And I think, honestly, I admire the, like you said, ambition to go take a shot at a guy that's got this pedigree, has clear, awesome athletic traits, hasn't necessarily produced yet, hasn't shown that in extended minutes he can be the guy to put up the numbers you need to make an impact, but again has this massive talent. And if Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw both end up playing to that 5-star potential in their second years, Ohio State can all of a sudden, with Bruce Thornton in the backcourt, with Michi Johnson, with some of the depth that they have, even with Devin Royal and some other pieces, like this is a team that is starting to build back to a place where it can compete atop the Big Ten. So really a big win today for Ohio State when it looked like their portal options were kind of thinning there for a little bit. Were some key targets committed elsewhere, whether that be Trey Townsend or Tucker Anderson. But I think Sean Stewart now is just a massive victory, and now it's what you do with that last scholarship.
Yeah, 4 total transfers for Ohio State so far. Michi Johnson, Micah Parrish, Aaron Bradshaw, Sean Stewart. Like you said, 1 more scholarship left. And I think Ohio State has added 4 players who we would both expect to all be impact players for Ohio State next season. Still need 1 more. And I think the question now becomes, with that last spot, what would help Ohio State more? Does Ohio State need a backup center more, someone who can spell Aaron Bradshaw other than Austin Parks, the only other true center you have on the roster? Or does Ohio State need a 3-point shooter? Because there's not a lot of guys on this roster who have a proven 3-point shooting pedigree. And so I think you could make an argument for both sides. I think you're going to be a little bit thin in the post there if you don't add another center, but you might, Sean Stewart's a tall enough guy that, he could play the 5 at times. You might be able to make up for that with some of your small ball lineups. Would it be more beneficial for Ohio State to land a 3 or a 4 type, someone who can play forward, play wing, and give this team a little bit more long range shooting ability? Where do you stand on that, Andy?
I think for me, I would like to see someone who does add another 3-point component. But I think the dichotomy here is that I'm not sure it's as much of a concern within the program. And not that, they expect Sean Stewart or Aaron Bradshaw to necessarily turn into prolific 3-point shooters out of nowhere. But, in college basketball, this isn't the NBA. I think there's a lot of different ways to build a team. And when you sit back and you think about, again, there's been tons of different styles. If you look at national champions over the past decade, 5 years, there's been a ton of different styles of teams that have competed at the top of college basketball. Final Four teams have done it a lot of different ways. I think the modern approach of basketball is obviously the 3-point shot is more valuable because if you make X% of your threes, it's more valuable than, unless you're within a few feet of the rim. That's kind of the style now. But I think when you have the ability to run the floor and push the pace, if that's what you want to do, then that's kind of how this team is being constructed. And the indications I've got behind the scenes is that last spot is still looking to be used for more front court depth. Now, if you can get someone who adds that 3-point component and gives you that front court depth, then that'd be huge. Just to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right? Sean Stewart is a guy that is versatile enough in terms of his rebounding and shot blocking, playing above his size. I think there are situations where you could deploy him as a small ball center, and then you have Devin Royal at the 4, and that allows Aaron Bradshaw to come off the court. But for me, it seems the direction is clear that they want to add another front court depth piece, and I'm not sure that shooting is the determining factor in that addition. Versatility and the ability to kind of push the pace, play with some tempo, seem to be the 2 main factors in general that they've looked for this transfer portal cycle, but that they're still looking for in that front court spot. If it were me, again, I just don't think they have the shooters they need to space the floor and get some of these interior pieces working, get some of those guys downhill. I think you do need that other shooter, but I'm not the one building this roster, and I think that I am not going to have as good a vision for it as the people that are. So all that to say, I think that shooting should be a priority to address with this last scholarship spot, but that might not be the direction that's taken. And I can't say it's wrong. I am not the authority on this matter. It's just one guy's perspective.
Well, we will see how Ohio State ultimately uses that final scholarship spot. Transfer portal now closed for college basketball, so they will have to choose from the players who are currently in the portal, but Ohio State now knows, other than one more addition, what its roster is going to look like for 24-25, and certainly Sean Stewart, the newest addition, is going to be a big piece of that. So stay tuned with us over at 11warriors.com. For more coverage of Ohio State basketball. For Andy Anders, I'm Dan Hope. This has been Press Coverage.